that is the power of an independent media. I recently was covering the Democratic and Republican conventions in Denver and then in St. Paul, Minnesota, the Republicans. And on the first day of the Republican convention, I was on the floor of the convention interviewing the delegates from the hottest state. That's Alaska.
Alaska, right.
And then I was heading over to the Minnesota delegation, and I got a call from one of our producers that two of our other producers, Sharif Abdel-Quddus and Nicole Salazar, were being arrested in downtown St. Paul when they were trying to videotape protests.
Right.
So I raced with my cameraman through the streets of St. Paul to where they were. It was a big parking lot, and the riot police were lined up. They totally contained whatever the situation had been before. A lot of people were arrested behind the line, and I went up to them. I had my credentials around my neck, and I said to the police, I wanted to speak to the commanding officer. I was a accredited journalist. They were accredited, and we needed our producers released. And they ripped me through the line, and they handcuffed me, the rigid plastic handcuffs that dig into your wrist. They twisted my arms behind my back, threw me up against the wall, and then made me sit on the ground. I kept saying, we're journalists. You don't want to do this. You have to free us. And then I demanded to see our reporters because I heard that they were hurt as well as arrested. I saw Sharif across the parking lot, and he was standing there, arms behind his back, handcuffed, his credentials dangling from his neck. They finally brought me over to him. We were both standing there. Again, I was proclaiming loudly that we were journalists. You could see the credentials around our neck. And so the Secret Service came over and ripped the credentials from around my neck, took them off of Sharif. And then I was put into the police wagon, and there Nicole was with her credentials around her neck. Now, the videotape of my arrest was shown close to was viewed close to 1 million times on YouTube. It's astounding. During the Republican National Convention, the most watched YouTube video.
Certainly we saw it in Canada on television too.
It was amazing, just a few seconds, but the effect that had. And then the videotape that Nicole took of her own violent arrest. She hadn't gone to do that. She'd gone to videotape what was happening on the streets. But as the riot police came at her and she kept her camera up showing her credentials, the police are yelling, face on the ground, face on the ground. This is about 30 seconds. And she is saying, press, press. And they take her down between the cars. They've got their boot or knee on her back. Her face is in the ground. They're pulling on her legs so it bloodies her face. What's the first thing they do? They pull the battery from her camera. But it is chilling to hear her scream as she goes down. Now, if a woman is taken down, or any person, between two parked cars by two men, you'd hope a police officer would be there to arrest the assailants. Unfortunately, it was the police who were the assailants, and they were arresting their victim. When you attack, when you ban, when you arrest journalists, you're closing the eyes and ears of a democratic society. You are endangering a democratic society. There's a reason why our profession, journalism, is the only one explicitly protected by the U.S. Constitution. We're supposed to be the check and balance on power. And when that's threatened, we are all threatened. They arrested the victims. They arrested Sharif and Nicole. But really, the victim is democracy. And that all has to be challenged. The media are the most powerful institutions on earth, more powerful than any bomb, more powerful than any missile. The Pentagon has deployed the media in the case of Iraq and the case of Afghanistan, and we have to take it back. After we were freed from jail that night because of the outcry, though the charges are still pending against us, I continue to wear my arrest bracelet until these charges are dropped. And we weren't the only journalists. Over 40 journalists were arrested in the Republican National Convention week in St. Paul. In fact, over 800 people were arrested. The next day, I went off to the police press conference. The police chief of St. Paul, John Harrington, was holding forth. And I asked him, what has he instructed the police department, the police, to do about journalists? How does he expect us to operate in this environment? And he said, we could embed with a mobile field force, the police mobile field force. Now, I mean, when you think about how profound this point is, how problematic this is, I think the embedding process has brought us to an all-time low, that reporters embedding in the front lines of troops in Iraq, that is bringing you only one perspective when you're being fed by them, protected by them, you're sleeping with them, you get one perspective. What about embedding in Iraqi communities and Iraqi hospitals and the peace movement around the world? But now, this extremely problematic form of witness is being used as a model for the cities of this country to embed with the police forces of our country, that has to be challenged. We have to remain independent. Democracy Now! Is a daily, grassroots, global, unembedded, independent, international investigative news hour. Our motto is to be the exception to the rulers. And that should not just be our motto. It should be the motto of all the media. I've written a couple books with my brother, David, who's also a journalist. And our second book was called Static. And the reason we call it that is because in this high-tech digital age with high-definition television and digital radio, still all we get is ever more static. That veil of distortion and lies and misrepresentations and half-truths that obscure reality, when what we need is the media to give us the dictionary definition of static. Criticism, opposition, unwanted interference. We need a media that covers power, not covers for power. We need a media that is the fourth estate, not for the state. And we need a media that covers the movements that create static and make history.
And therefore we need a media that creates peace.
And that is, I think the media is a tremendous force for peace. Because when you can hear and watch someone speaking for themselves, you can bridge divides between communities. You don't have to agree with what you hear or watch, but you hear where someone is coming from. You can identify, at least you can understand why they think the way they do. And that is a force for peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the Inuit tradition, dancing animals are an expression of joy and new life that animals receive when their spirit is renewed. And for those who work for peace, there is required both the tenacity of the bear, but hopefully there are times when there is joy and a sense of new life and new hope as spirits are renewed. And so the dancing bear from the Inuit iconography is a symbol for us of communication and peace. And Amy Goodman, for all that you have done, for all the Kevins of this world and boys and girls, men and women similar to Kevin who have those kind of stories to be told, we hope that you will accept this Communication for Peace Award and recall, when you look at it, the promise of new life that is inherent in communication.
Well, I am very honored to receive this, and as I receive this, I know this couldn't be done well for us without the whole remarkable Democracy Now! Team. And beyond that, all of the reporters who risk their lives or lose their lives around the world. I think about them today, especially those in war zones like in Iraq, especially the journalists who have died there, who have been hurt trying to cover the story. And I am deeply moved by this honor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.